You for your attendance. This is easy for me to introduce our guest speaker. One may ask why. Why do I say that? Because two things we share in common. We both are from Tidewater, Virginia. We both are alum of Norfolk State University. Okay. So when I asked General Rochelle and extended the invitation if he would come and be our guest speaker this year, without hesitation, he said, of course. So that's a great thing. So last year's speaker, Brigadier General retired Tia Young, wanted to pass on to the congregation today and General Rochelle that we have a great American speaking to us today. So, sir, kudos to you. And I think all that are present and watching remember Joan Young from last year. I take pride in this introduction because, like I say, it's easy. This is the second time that I've had the opportunity to introduce General Rochelle in person. The first was at Norfolk State's 75th anniversary. He was not yet promoted to Lieutenant General, but he had already been selected. And I then let everybody in attendance at that celebration know that General Rochelle not only had been selected to be a three-star general from our alma mater, which is now the largest HBCU in the state of Virginia. Say that again, the largest HBCU in the state of Virginia. Because it was so prominent at that time, because he was also going to be the G1 of the Army. And if, for you all that don't know, the G1 is the same as the Chief of Personnel. So that means he had a daunting task ahead of him. That is, people. Ensuring that the Army had people. Ensuring that the Army not only had active duty people to go places and to fill spaces, but also had people standing in the pipeline to enter the service. So he's sitting here today, so obviously he did a good job. Obviously he did a good job. So without further ado, I'm not going to talk about all the things that he did in the Army. You all see his bio. You know, military men, and I'm going to say this, black military men don't go far if they don't do a good job. Okay? So we got a three-star retired here with us today. Okay. So without further ado, General Rochelle, the floor is yours, sir.
I got it. Thank you. Bear with me while I put this cover on. This was given to me. The one thing I do well is follow instructions. Just ask my wife. Moses, thank you for that introduction, and thank you for your friendship. I can't tell you how honored I am to be with you here today on this particular occasion. It is really an honor that is quite humbling. And I want to take a couple of minutes to acknowledge something that struck me as I heard and listened to the wonderful introductions from our veterans introducing themselves. What I heard was a legacy, a true legacy, the one that 1968 struck me really hard. It was a good year, by the way. Struck me really hard. And what I thought about was what one had to forego and put on the line, to raise your right hand in 1968 or earlier. And Moses didn't mention my time as the chief of Army recruiting, and that's one of the 2 or 3 very brief stories that I want to share with you today. But I spent the second longest time in command of U.S. Army recruiting nationwide before I was selected for promotion to 3 stars and the opportunity to serve as the Army G1. Tough, tough, tough assignments. Tough. And quite candidly, there was one period in there, 2005, fiscal year 2005, that was one of the darkest years of my life, and I'll share that with you in just a moment. But what I'm going to ask you to do, participating with me in, is if you are a Vietnam veteran, you served in the Republic of Vietnam, I'm going to ask you to remain seated. Then I'm going to invite everyone else, everyone, service members, veterans, guests who are simply in attendance, to stand and give them a round of applause. Please. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. You know, General Powell, Colin Powell, who I had the pleasure of meeting and communicating with almost to the end of his life, told an audience recently, not very recently, that we stand on the shoulders, those of us who we're currently serving, stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us. I see you looking at your watch. You told me I had an hour and a half, so I'm, okay. No, he didn't tell me that. He said we stand on the shoulders of those who served before us, and that is so true. And candidly, I would tell you that I believe it's even more true for those who like our honored guest who did serve in the Republic of Vietnam, and those who served at the time during Vietnam era service as well, because it took the same amount of chutzpah to raise your right hand at that time. And Moses and I remember what it was like on campus in the 70s, 68, 70s, wearing the Army ROTC uniform. And we are standing on the shoulders of everyone in this room today. And quite candidly, our nation is also standing on your shoulders. I want to share 3 quick stories with you. Frankly, because everyone in this room can attest to what I'm about to say in terms of how important it is to recognize and to acknowledge that none of us got where we are by ourselves. None of us. Not one of us. We had people who came alongside us, thanks be to God, who helped us make it to where we are today. Some of them are no longer with us. Some of them are. And I'm going to tell you 3 quick stories from my experience in uniform that attest to this. In 1972, when I was commissioned as a field artillery lieutenant, detail field artillery lieutenant, and was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Fort Campbell, Kentucky was a weird place in 1972. All of Kentucky was a weird place in 1972. My battery commander was a Vietnam veteran, aviator, field artilleryman from Louisiana. And we had been in the field for an exercise, several days of exercises, and the young lieutenants came, there were 3 or 4 of us, came back in and went immediately home to get showered. So I'm back in my quarters on Fort Campbell, Kentucky, literally laying on the floor in my living room. My wife was there, and we were talking. My phone rings. Voice on the other end of the phone, I don't remember who it was, said, "The BC wants to see you. The battery commander wants to see you." So I go back, jump up, get my boots back on, head back into the battery headquarters. And as I round the corner and I'm prepared to knock on his door to announce myself, I see that he's sitting behind his desk and another sister battery commander is standing beside and speaking with him. They're having a conversation. So I hesitated, did not knock. He looks up, because he caught me out of the side of his eye, the battery commander did, caught me out of the side of his eye, and he looks up and he says, "What do you want, boy?" Ooh. I can still feel that right now. I can still feel that. And I hesitated, and frankly, what really caught my attention was the look on the sister battery commander's face, because he witnessed it and he went. So 3 weeks go by. I could barely speak to the man during those 3 weeks without feeling very guarded and very anxious in being around him. And I didn't dare tell my wife about this because she hides nothing. She is for real. And if she doesn't like you, you're going to know it, just like that. So I didn't dare tell her because there were a lot of social things that were going on in the Army at that time, and I didn't want her to go Norfolk on anybody. And it was like carrying around a watermelon in my gut for 3 weeks. A watermelon. I didn't know what to do with it. I honestly did not know what to do with it. I shared the information with a couple of the other lieutenants, all of whom were Vietnam vets. They'd been to Vietnam and back, young first lieutenants, wild as heck. I mean, and one of them said, "Let's just go take him out." I said, "You might be able to get away with that, but I won't. I know I won't." So one night, I'm sitting at home, and keeping the secret from her was almost as much of a burden on me as carrying that watermelon was. Almost as much. And so finally, one night I said, and Moses, you'll get a real kick out of this because you know the person I'm going to speak about next. One night I realized there is someone here that I can talk to about this. So I placed a call to Major Willie Wright, who had been the professor of military science at Norfolk State College then, university now, who was also assigned to the division at that time. His wife answered the phone, lovely lady. They're beautiful people, wonderful, wonderful people. His wife answers the phone and she says, "Michael, he's really sick. He has a very, very bad cold. And I heard Major Wright from somewhere else in the house yell, 'Who is it? Who's calling me?' She told him. And he said, 'Tell him to come on over right now. Tell him to come on over right now.' When I got there, he didn't live very far from me. He was seated on his couch with a towel over his head, leaning over a steamy substance, and trying to breathe. And I related the story to him about what had happened, and I was simply bearing my soul to someone I knew could appreciate what I had experienced, and who would give me solid and sound advice. As I said what the battery commander said, he went. He said, "What?" And I said, almost in tears, I said, sir, that's exactly what he said. That's exactly what he said. Major Wright said, go home. I got it. I got it. What I didn't know, honest to goodness, I did not know that I was speaking to the deputy IG of the 101st. I did not know that. None of us get where we are by ourselves. It doesn't happen. The next day, I get a phone call from the battalion commander. He'd never called me before. I barely knew the man, except socially. Hardly ever went to the battalion headquarters. He called, the battery commander took the call, and he said, the battalion commander wants to see you. What does the battalion commander want to see you about? And I honestly just told him, sir, I don't know. I have no idea. He said, well, get on up there. To make a long story short, the rest of my time as a field artilleryman went pretty darn good. Went pretty darn well. I shouldn't have said good. It went well. Very well. Very well. But none of us get where we are by ourselves. The next story I want to share with you that illustrates the same thing was at the end of my time as an artilleryman, and I didn't want to leave. I really wanted to stay as an artilleryman, but I was detailed field artillery with a regular Army commission in the Adjutant General Corps. So I had to report to the Adjutant General, Lieutenant Colonel, at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I really didn't want to. So I head up to the division headquarters, very, very disturbed that I had to leave my cross cannons. I had to take my cross cannons off and put on this little shield, this AG shield. So I report in to the Lieutenant Colonel, Adjutant General of the 101st, who's seated behind this huge desk. I'd never seen a desk that big. Never seen a desk that big. And papers stacked up that he was signing and reviewing and what have you. And I guess I was supposed to be impressed by that, I guess. I report in to I won't mention his name. And I said, sir, Lieutenant Rochelle reporting as ordered, and I'll be going back to the field artillery as soon as I can, sir. He looks over his glasses at me. What did you say, Lieutenant? And I saluted and said the same thing again. This is the gospel truth. Sir, Lieutenant Rochelle reporting as ordered, and I'll be going back to the field artillery as soon as I can, sir. And he says, and why is that, Lieutenant? And without batting an eye, I said, sir, I want to be where men are men. He threw me out. He threw me out. He went into histrionics, I can't even describe it to you. He was yelling so loud, people outside the building could hear him. His deputy, and I will mention him, his name, Major Andrew Tinker. His deputy came in and said, Lieutenant, what did you say to him? I said, I have no idea what's wrong with him. I just told him the truth. I spoke the truth. He buried me so deep in his organization, that is, the Adjutant General did. He buried me so deep in his organization that I could almost not see daylight. Fast forward, almost 15 years, I'm now back in the 101st Airborne Division as the first black G1 of that historic division. Thank you. The civilian now, and at this point, the civilian now who carried the title of the Adjutant General of the division works for me. I'm being briefed when I go back by the civilian adjutant general of the 101st Airborne Division in the same office that I was evicted from 15 years earlier. So while I'm being briefed, wonderful briefing, I guess, because I didn't hear a word. I mean, I was 15 years behind thinking about, by the way, the same desk. The same desk. The same desk. And this gentleman is briefing me on his mission, his role, his responsibilities, and I'm seeing Lieutenant Rochelle, 98 pounds soaking wet, standing in front of the desk before I was evicted, royally evicted from that office. We don't get where we are by ourselves. There's a hand. There's a mighty hand that looks over us. And people come alongside us at that will, at his will, to help us. The last story I want to tell is 2000. I had just left the office of the Secretary of Defense, former Senator Bill Cohen, and I was had been the senior military assistant to his deputy, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who then left, and I was reassigned to the Soldier Support Center at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. This was during the war in Kosovo. I flew into Europe to get some briefings, and the officer, the two-star, I was a one-star by then, the two-star said, let's go to Kosovo. We get at that time he was called the SINK, SAC-UR. We got the SINK's airplane, flew into Kosovo, and wonderful non-commissioned officers, like we heard introduce themselves earlier, put together a dinner for the two Army generals, Lady two-star and me a one-star, two different tables with wonderful soldiers around the table, at each table. And as only non-commissioned officers, wonderful non-commissioned officers can do, they screen the background of these soldiers to make sure that there's some connection between the general and the people around him, or her, in this case. So I'm seated there. It's a fantastic meal, fantastic dinner. It was cold as all get out in Kosovo. It was dead of winter. Fantastic young soldiers around me. And there was this one young blonde seated, I think she was to my right, I can't even remember. But she's just constant. I got this general's ear, I'm gonna wear it out. I'm gonna wear it out. She's talking. It's fine. But I noticed that right across from me is this young, skinny, black specialist, as I recall, who literally never lifted his head to look at me. I mean, he didn't want to be there. It was evident by his body language. He did not want to be there. And I noticed it. I felt that vibe. And I kept trying to, yeah. Because I wanted to be able to pull this young man in. Well, and this is the last story. Moses is getting ready to do something here. I'm just messing with him. This young woman inhaled once, during the whole meal. And when she did, I immediately keyed in on this young soldier across from me. Now, listen to what I'm about to tell you now. And I said, where are you from? I can't remember his name. I wish I could. And I think I have a photograph of me with him at somewhere, and I can't locate it. But where are you from? Sir, I'm from Virginia. Head back down. Oh, I'm from Virginia. This is the work of non-commissioned officers, great non-commissioned officers now that I'm describing to you. Where in Virginia are you from? Sir, I'm from Norfolk. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. Kosovo, the dead of winter, we're both from Norfolk? Where in Norfolk are you from? Listen to what he said. Sir, you wouldn't know where I'm from. She comes in again. I said, hold on a second. She stopped. Hold on a second. You know, when I was in college, I drove a yellow cab. So I know Norfolk pretty well. Where in Norfolk are you from? He said, sir, I'm from Bowling Park, the projects. I said, I lived in Bowling Park. He lifted his head up. Then he was like that. And one last thing. Bowling Park no longer exists, but he said, no, in fact, I added, I said, in fact, I can remember from first grade to second grade and maybe third, I lived at 1111 Godfrey Avenue in Bowling Park. He said, sir, my grandmother lives in that building right now. That's magic. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. She said, that's God. And for the rest of that evening, we took photographs, arm around my shoulder. Just, you know, he had a lot to tell me then. We don't get to any level of success. You name the level of success, whatever it is, without a lot of luck and without the hand of providence moving around us, between us, and over us, and bringing wonderful, wonderful people into our lives. Now, so let me conclude by thanking you again for the opportunity to come and spend this Veterans Day with you. Thank you once again for your service, every minute of it. When I was commissioned, I had no thought of staying in the Army for 37 years. None. None. And I have to say that thanks be to God, it was all good. They were all good years. But I wouldn't have done 1 second beyond what I did. That was it. Not one more second. I remember waking up one morning at Fort McNair to reveille. And all of a sudden, I didn't want to hear that anymore. I'd heard it for 37 years. I didn't want to hear that anymore. And I knew it was time to go. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you for your participation. And thank you for who you are. It's been a delight.
And sir, thank you for your great act of kindness today. Thank you for those stories. I say we all got some stories. I can remember one at Aberdeen Proving Ground. Platoon sergeant called me Whitey. He said it a couple times. I was just an E4 in the Army, but I couldn't take it. So I asked permission, much like you did, knocked on the door. I said, Sarge, if you would, not call me that. My name is Specialist Whitehurst, and Whitey just doesn't sit. And I said, if you don't cease, we do have a company commander. So that was the end of that. So, yeah. But for your kindness, your participation with us today, we just want to leave you with something. Michael D. Rochelle, 2022 Union Bethel Veterans Day Program Keynote Speaker, given on this 5th day of November, 2022, Reverend Dr. William M. Campbell, Jr., Senior Pastor.
You may be seated. Somebody say, wow. We've been carrying those watermelons a long time. Thank you, General Rochelle, for sharing with us as you have done today. Those stories are what helps to make us. It helps us to navigate these uncertain times. And thank you for the watermelons. Thank you for the poetic justice that the deaths we once had to face, we can then come back and stand behind. And for those stories that help us. And I'm especially appreciative for that young man, because you never know what table you will sit at, where someone on the other side just needs to see someone who looks like them get to where they'd love to be able to go. And I can only imagine the feeling of that young man as you shared, lifting up his head. You look like me, and I can get to where you are. Wow. Thank you for being that living example. We have been blessed today. Amen. Amen. We salute Colonel Whitehurst and to all of our members of Armed Forces Ministry that work to make this day so successful. And thankful most of all for these wonderful giants you continue to bring to us. Colonel Whitehurst reaching and pulling, and one of the giants we were working on has already answered his eternal reward. But we're very thankful that God's got some special people in some wonderful places. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. And we celebrate all of our veterans today and thank God for each and every one of you. Just as a point of record, I've been texting officers at Fort Belvoir and NCOs down at Fort Hood, where I was for 14 years, to have them tune in to the General because they love to watch our program. So many have heard this story today, and this story will continue to be repeated. And thank you for sharing it with us. God bless you.
Right, in closing, I want to thank all that came out today. I want to thank all who are watching on our platforms. But most importantly, I want to thank my committee members. I want to thank all the participants on the program today. I want to thank our ushers on the doors. I want to thank our AV team. And I want to make sure I get this name right. Let's give Miss Ayanna Brown, that sung our national anthem today. She's in high demand. She had to leave right after she sang to go sing at football game. Okay, so just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And for all of our veterans, if you haven't opened your bag yet, this is what your gift is this year. Hope it's something that you'll cherish, certainly something that you can use. And for all the vets that aren't in attendance today, we'll announce a date that you'll be able to come by and pick yours up. Okay? We'll announce the time, a date and time for you to come by and pick yours up. Okay, so, but we're certainly again thankful for you, General Rochelle, for making a ride from over in Virginia. Patsy C for being here. And everybody, that's everybody. Finally, I want to say we've got boxed lunches. So on your way out, make sure you get a lunch. Thank you very much.